Today we're talking about Argentina and how Nazis ended up there and how Argentina is far south in South America. And speaking to that point, we can see here from the middle of the United States to Venezuela, Argentina is actually twice that distance or more. So Argentina is actually very south in South America. We'll look at a temperature map later, but I would assume that most of the southern point of Argentina actually gets quite cold. Looking at the countries it borders, you have Chile, which is, it's always funny how long Chile is and just takes up this whole Pacific coast. And it also shares with Bolivia. Paraguay and Uruguay are a couple countries that I always get mixed up. I know they're in these places, but I forget who's who. You can see the capital of Buenos Aires. And if we pull up a population density map, we can see this is one of the most, maybe the most densely populated place in South America outside of Sao Paulo. Buenos Aires is kind of the main city. It's really the main hub of Argentina. We can look at it. Most of Argentina is pretty lightly populated. And I love these little satellite cities. They make like a web around the main city. And then you can also follow them on the line. So there's probably a road that goes straight through here. And you have these towns that pop up along the road to other major centers. Like here is Rosario. And you can see the roads, the little towns that pop up along the road. Let's say you wanted to fly to Buenos Aires. You want to do a trip down there. Well, here's Google Flights. And if we're looking at flights in September or October, we can see some of them get down to around 900. So that's pretty good considering, we'll look at this map again. Considering how far Argentina is from the United States, it's twice your distance to Colombia. So to be able to take a flight for 900 there, I think that's not too bad. If you were not familiar, this is Argentina's president, Javier Milei. He's been very conservative, very active in removing things like DEI policy and just cutting those from the government. He's also famous for taming the runaway inflation that Argentina has had. Let's pull up a chart of that. So back in 2008, 15 cents got you one Argentine peso. Now, a fraction of a penny gets you a peso. And you can't really see it on this graph, but in the last few years, it had been especially bad. So going from 2020 to 2024, the peso lost about 90% of its value in just those years. So anyone that has held cash in Argentina has gotten crushed. I mean, their money, it's basically gone. If they had $100 back in, if they had 100 Argentine pesos back in 2003, I mean, those pesos are basically worthless now. So unless someone had been owning gold or, Bitcoin, which is kind of the purpose of Bitcoin is to avoid these issues, or if they had, unless they had some investment in real estate or something that was where they kept their money and something other than cash, that's the only way they would have avoided this. But the Argentine peso has just been completely demolished over the last 20 years, and especially just in the last 5 or 6. So I want to talk about the makeup of the country for a little bit, the demographics. You can see the blue. This is the more heavily European group, and then the green is the more Native American group. So you can see the kind of the white population is along the coast, and the natives are more inland. So Argentina is surprisingly white, especially after World War II, when there was what was called a rat line into Argentina. So rat line was a system of escape routes used by the German Nazis to flee in after World War II. And here's some high-ranking Nazis who had escaped. Here's a map showing the density of German last names in certain parts of Argentina. So you can see, once again, kind of along the coast with around Buenos Aires here. That's where, actually Buenos Aires is up here, but you can see down in this area and in here, and then in this the point up here, those are 3 really high density areas of German populations. And there's even a conspiracy theory that Hitler was able to make it to Argentina, and that's where he lived out the rest of his life. Some other famous people from Argentina: Lionel Messi, Che Guevara and Pope Francis are all Argentinian. So here's our population pyramid. It kind of looks like a arrowhead. You can see the population really started shrinking in this most recent last 5 years, and it has to be largely due to the inflation pressures. It just costs too much for the people to be making families. And if we scroll forward a few years, this site is assuming the population won't really do anything else. It's just going to basically stagnate at that, and the younger generations won't really get any larger. So then you just left with this bubble, and it starts to look more like a mushroom instead of a pyramid. So you go out to 2080, and you have this mushroom shaped population pyramid. A lot of natural beauty in Argentina. Let's look at some places to visit. Here's Iguazu Falls, and wow, that really is a pretty place. It looks tropical. It shows the variety that Argentina has. It looks very lush. That's definitely a great picture. So Iguazu Falls. There's salt flats, glaciers. Definitely lots of this icy mountainous type of look in Argentina. And the Carnival. Earlier, I was touting Argentina as the second strongest country, but in fact, looks like they're going to be the third strongest, with Brazil being number one in terms of military, then Colombia number two in military in South America. Argentina, in fact, comes in 33rd place, so actually quite a bit lower than I thought they would. And I suppose this makes sense. I mean, look at their location. Who's their enemies? It's going to be Uruguay, Paraguay, and Chile. They're completely protected from any kind of West Coast invasion, unless it's from Chile. And then, to their south is the Penguins. And then to the east is this huge ocean. So it's kind of like the United States, or really all of the Americas. There's not too much immediate competition, so they really don't have a huge need to really build up a huge military. In terms of GDP, they're ranked 22nd, and they have 646 billion of GDP. And so they are beaten out by Brazil, who is number one in South America at over 2 trillion. So we're going to look up the cost of living in Buenos Aires, and we have that here compared to New York. Now this is going to be not all that accurate because they have had so much inflation. The answers that have been given here are going to be a little bit skewed in a way. It's going to be just hard. There's been so much change in the currency. But from what we can see, everything so far has been quite a bit cheaper than New York, as expected. Gas, $4.30 in Buenos Aires compared to the $3.44 of New York. Clothes also quite expensive. Imagine having to pay $111 for a pair of jeans. Yeah, that's not going to work. Or a summer dress is almost twice as much in Buenos Aires as it would be in New York. Apartments, though, come off quite a bit cheaper. A $4,000 apartment, the equivalent would be around $700 in Buenos Aires, so quite a bit better there. So just don't buy any jeans when you're in Buenos Aires and you'll be okay. In general, I would say things should be pretty cheap because they have gone through so much inflation, and when you convert your dollars to their currency, that dollar is going to be so strong. So I imagine if you traveled there, and I have heard this from people that have traveled recently, that being there, it did feel pretty cheap. So that's nice if you have a foreign currency like the dollar that has remained strong, and you can go and get things for cheap while you're on your vacation. All right, I want to make sure I look at this temperature map of Buenos Aires, and okay, so it has a good distribution. It's kind of at the latitude that we are in the United States, where you have these warm summers and then cold winters, but it's not usually all that cold. It looks like it's pretty good climate, right? So warm, it's around the high of 85, and then cold is around a low of 45. So that's a really nice temperature band all year round. Here's the humidity levels in the summer, which is our winter, but in their summer, the humidity is pretty low, while in the November through March it gets a bit more humid. And they're thinking the best time to visit is more in their summertime. So during their summertime, it's more it's a little bit more humid, but also the temperature is nice and warm without getting too hot. So it's a little unusual looking at a country this far south, because we're so used to the northern hemisphere countries, but here the better times to visit, their summer is our winter. So like November through March, those are the best times to visit. So what do you think? Would you do a trip to Argentina? I think I would. There's a lot to see there, a lot to do. You get a variety of the climates, that cooler part in the south with the glaciers, or something more tropical like this. So definitely a place to consider.